This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we are talking about the data-driven law firm. And what does that mean? Well, you're going to find out. My guest today is attorney Chris Clark, and he has centered his brand, his law firm around being data-driven. So Chris, really glad to have you on. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks so much for inviting me to participate in this, and I think we're going to have a really good discussion.
Yeah. So before we jump in, give us the little rundown. Who are you? Where are you from? What should we know about you?
Yeah, I grew up in Virginia, came to North Carolina. Geez, probably, how long has it been now? I guess about 25 years ago or so, and have been in North Carolina ever since. I went to law school at the University of North Carolina, took a job out of law school with a big law firm in Charlotte, and worked in that big law firm environment for about 5 years. And then I left and I went and joined an intellectual property boutique law firm, about 8 to 10 lawyers during over the course of the time that I was there. And was really, I'd started my career focusing on business and corporate law, but always had an interest in IP. So this opportunity presented itself where I could join this IP firm and really do business and corporate law to support the firm's patent, trademark, and copyright clients, which turned out to be a really great fit and a really good experience for me. And I spent the next 10 years of my career there continuing to do business and corporate law, but also doing copyright and trademark law. And then about 4.5 years ago, I decided to branch out on my own. And so I started my own law firm. Our law firm is called Clark.Law. And we do those areas of practice primarily: business and corporate law, which can be anything from drafting business contracts, structuring deals, doing mergers, acquisitions, exits, bringing investors in, structuring strategic partnerships, all these kinds of things that businesses need. And also copyright and trademark. Particularly, we've got a particularly strong trademark practice, and I think that's in part because we just believe so strongly that having a strategy for your business's branding legally is so important. It's such an important piece of building from the beginning a really successful business. And so that's sort of my career in a nutshell. We're currently operating out of 2 offices here in the Charlotte area. We've got one right in uptown Charlotte, and then the other one is here in Cornelius, which is just a little bit north of Charlotte, still in Mecklenburg County.
Yep. Which, in behind the scenes is literally like 2 doors down from where we are right now. So
yeah, your company's office is right there.
Yep, exactly. So always good to have a neighbor on. So yeah, so just to jump right in, what exactly does it mean to be a data-driven law firm?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot because what you said in the introduction is 100% correct. We've really tried to identify ourselves as a data-driven law firm, and this isn't something that I've invented or that I've come up with. In fact, in thinking about spending this time with you, I took a couple books off the shelf that I have here in my office that were both written by really smart people who have I think done a lot of really good, smart work in the area of operating a data-driven law firm. So first thing I want to say is this is not something unique to me or that I invented or came up with on my own, but I think it is for I think a variety of reasons. It's something that the legal industry is really being slow to adopt. And so let me answer the question you asked from my perspective. From my perspective, a data-driven law firm is a law firm that relies on data. And I know that seems like an obvious answer, but let me give you some examples of ways that I think might resonate with businesses and people who like our clients who have I think really appreciated our approach in this way. Clients come to us to help them solve problems.
Yeah.
And I think really regardless of what area of practice you may be in, if you're a lawyer, that is probably in one way or another, that summarizes what you do. Clients come to you and you help them solve problems. It's no secret that legal fees can be quite expensive. And so often when someone's hiring a lawyer, whether you're an individual or whether you're a huge corporation, you're expecting value for your legal dollars. You're expecting that if you're going to pay what law firms charge, you want to get the highest quality services from that as possible. And so, in the past, I think historically, lawyers have been comfortable when presented with a problem or a question from a client. What they will give them typically is often an educated guess or a hunch, or they say, well, based on my best professional judgment, I recommend this, or I think this. A lot of times you get, jokes are made at lawyers' expense, but a lot of times the answer is it depends. And, there's nothing wrong with that because legal issues are complicated and a lot of times it does depend. I mean, situations are unique and what applies in one situation may not apply in another. But I think what I'm leading up to is I think clients are reaching a point of sophistication where they're demanding something from lawyers more than their hunch or their best professional judgment. And so one thing we can do is we can say, well, in my experience, the answer to your question is X, but let's look at the data that is available. Either data, like in our case, in our firm, we collect and compile data from our own practice and from our own business to analyze. But also, there's never been more data available to people than there is today. And so I think making the most of the information that is available so that you can better serve your clients and better answer their questions, that is certainly one way, and maybe I think the most important way that we define ourselves as a data-driven law firm. Let me give you one other example that's completely different from that, because the term, one thing I like about the term data-driven law firm is it does encompass several different aspects of the way that we run our business.
Yeah.
So second example is lawyers, I think, have a really unique way of setting their fees. It's almost unlike any other industry that I can think of. If you were to go and ask a lawyer, why do you charge what you charge, whether it's per hour or whether it's on a fixed fee basis or something like that? A lot of times they don't have a very good answer. It's really based on, well, look, last year my hourly rate was $500 and I know I'm supposed to raise it every year. So this year it's $525 and that's just what it is. Or, hey, I know, the firm that I used to work at charged $2,500 to do trademark applications. So that's what I charge. And that's just, kind of the going rate.
Yeah.
Those just aren't very smart answers, in my opinion. And so one thing that we've been really careful about is we know what our costs are, and we know what revenue we need to make to sustain our business and to be profitable. And we've been really careful to analyze with respect to tasks that we do frequently In other words, things that we repeat on a regular basis, we do for various clients this task. We just track that really carefully, and we zero in a very specific way on what our costs are. And if you do that, you can, we've built a little tool internally that does this, but it's not complicated. You can figure out, this is the amount of time it takes for each individual person within our business to do what they have to do to deliver this service for a client. And you can extrapolate from that. Once you've done it 20 times, you can go back and analyze it, and you can really figure out, okay, these are my costs, this is our profit margin, this is the revenue we need, and that you can set your prices that way in a way that's really tied to something other than, well, my buddy's been out of law school for 15 years and his rate's $500 an hour, so I guess that's what mine should be. Those kind of things, clients are not going to tolerate those types of answers much longer. And I think to a certain degree, they're not tolerating them now. So that's two examples of what for us being a data-driven law firm means.
Yeah. So I guess one other way that, I was thinking about with this as well. And actually one point I wanted to make, because this, and I don't want to jump down this rabbit hole because this would be a completely separate episode, but, when it comes to figuring out what your rates are, I know that you use the profit first model, and sort of how you, manage your finances as a business. We use it in our business as well. I think it's a great model, especially for smaller businesses who may struggle with cash flow. So going back to just kind of data-driven and stuff like that, one thing that I think, at least that I've seen in the connection that I've kind of made, is that recently there have been a lot of these apps, other companies that have come up that are kind of on that data side. Maybe they've, not necessarily in the sense that you earlier described it, but they're basically commodifying lawyers, like the Rocket lawyers, the LegalZoom, stuff like that. What do you think is the future there with that? Is that sort of automation, that data-driven sort of thing, the DIY stuff, is that do you think lawyers should be worried about that? Is that going to ultimately replace the legal world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I've thought about this and read a lot about this. I think it is, I'm fairly certain that there is a subset of the legal industry that will likely be replaced by artificial intelligence. The question is that good or bad? Is that good for lawyers? Is that good for clients? Is it good for businesses? And I tend to view it overall as a net positive. If you are the type of lawyer or the type of law firm that fears things like artificial intelligence and using data-driven tools and automation tools in your business, if you're a lawyer that is afraid of that, you likely are going to get left behind. I think this is probably something that you should be worried about. On the other hand, I would just really encourage, people to think about it differently. I think our firm is living proof that you can take these tools used for automating certain tasks and translate that into a positive for your business. You can become more efficient. You can have higher quality work product. I mean, for me, just to, I don't want to get too far off track here, and I don't think this is, but for me, I'm a person that has very high quality standards.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, oh, that's great. You would want that as a lawyer, you would want that as a business owner. But the way it manifests itself in my business is I found it very hard to delegate. Even with a great team of people, it has been and continues to be an ongoing struggle for me to delegate things to members of my team because I know that they're not going to get done the way that I would do them. Now, along comes, some of these automation tools that we have, we figured out how to use for our benefit. And it can really address that problem, that delegation problem that I just mentioned, because I'll give one example of the way that we use it. We use some text automation tools to ensure that whenever we are asked a question from a client or a potential client that we've been asked dozens of times before, we don't have to re-type or re-say that answer every single time. We can sit down and we can think about, okay, when we get asked this question, how would we want to answer it? What do we want to have in here? What is just like the ideal way to do that? Then we store that bank of text so that, again, this is one of these tests that happens again and again and again. Anytime we're faced with that question, we've got the answer dialed in immediately. We don't even have to really think about it. And to bring this all back around to where I started, I know that regardless of who it is on my team that is answering that question, they're answering it in a way that we've all agreed is good, and that we all approve of. And so it kind of takes away that concern, that kind of, it makes it easier to delegate things like that. And so I thought that was a good example to give of one way where these types of things that I think a lot of people fear, if you use them the right way, it can actually improve your business and improve your practice and improve client service.
Yeah. And one of the other elements of that, even if it's not, the LegalZooms or the Rocket Lawyers out there, you as a solo, now smaller law firm, now you're also kind of looking at those bigger law firms, the quote unquote BigLaw, stuff like that, where, you kind of see it as, well, they've got this extra revenue. That means they can have all these extra resources that they can provide that maybe I can't. Well, how can a smaller law firm gain a competitive advantage over a bigger law firm like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I say this with a high degree of confidence. The traditional big law firm model is in trouble. And it's in trouble for a lot of reasons. I guess if I had to really boil it down to one kind of concise big reason, I think irresponsible overhead maybe is a good way to put it. But yeah, I mean, I think to respond to what you said about things like Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom, there is, I think, a knee-jerk reaction on the part of lawyers to view those services as bad because perhaps they're taking away business from lawyers. I would say if you are a lawyer that has that something like LegalZoom makes a significant impact on your business, you're probably not doing something right. I just feel like there will never be a replacement for people who can, in a really smart, thoughtful, helpful way, solve problems. And the question is just, how do you do it? What tools do you have at your disposal that will help you serve your clients? So yeah, I get it. I think certain things perhaps that lawyers have traditionally done probably are going to become commodity type services that could be done either using a self-help type site like LegalZoom, or perhaps some automated AI type service that either hasn't been invented yet or we don't know about it yet. But that's not bad. I'm sure people who make horse buggies were terrified when the car came along, but overall, are we better now that we have automobiles versus having to ride around on horses? I think so, probably. So I don't subscribe to the the doom and gloom philosophy when it comes to these self-help legal services. Now to get back to what you asked about getting maybe smaller firms getting an advantage over bigger firms, I would say first, let me say, I worked at a big firm for 5 years, had a very positive experience. I have very high regard for the firm where I worked. I have lots of friends still at that firm and many other big firms, people that I think are lovely people, very smart, great lawyers. And so nothing personal. But that business model just isn't going to work much longer. And so small firms, how do you get that advantage over the big law firms? It's exactly what you suggested, John. Start looking into some of these tools that can equip you to, offer, probably at a lower price point, at a maybe more efficient, more positive client experience, some of the same services that these big firms offer. And automation and artificial intelligence means, in part, that my small law firm can complete tasks that have historically taken a whole team of people, or maybe even a whole department of people, to complete. Yeah. So I think the future is bright for small law firms and solo practitioners because of this technology that's available.
Yeah.
I think the future is bright for larger firms that are willing to adapt and make changes and really take the pulse of their market and understand, what these changes mean. The legal industry has historically been terribly slow to adopt new technology. You just don't see, and I think it's in part because lawyers are typically risk averse. And so they're not the type that, they tend not to be the type of business that rushes into some new type of technology, but you're going to have to start doing a little bit of that if you want to keep up. People are figuring out that the small firms and solo practitioners across this country are filled with really smart lawyers, many of which previously were at big law firms. If you want a significant chunk of your legal dollar to go to the well-appointed office with the 40-foot mahogany conference table on the top floor of the tallest building in your town, that's fine. But businesses are figuring out they can get the same quality of service in a less expensive, more efficient, more pleasurable way. And that's why I think I think small firms are the future is bright as in terms of their competitive landscape with bigger firms.
Yeah, and it's funny, just listening to your answer there, I was thinking back over some of the previous episodes we've had here, and I've definitely noticed a pattern where I was talking to attorney Daniel Alvarez on a previous episode, and he was talking about how smaller law firms usually end up taking the more specialized cases from those bigger law firms. We've talked with other guests just about how automations and, different technologies and stuff like that have helped them, become more efficient. It helps them provide better customer service than they might get at a larger law firm, stuff like that. And so, hearing you say, how, the big law business model is in trouble and may not be around, in a few years or however long down the road, it's just really interesting to hear. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool. To go back to one thing you said, what are some specific, technologies, data, centered things that small law firms can start to implement that can help them out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll just share from there's way too many to list now, but I'll share a few of our favorites that we rely on and that we really use heavily. So I mentioned earlier a tool called TextExpander. It's the one that we use. There's a lot of ways that you can solve that problem of just having really consistent text snippets, and the ways that you can use that text expansion technology in your business are limited only by your imagination. I mean, we use it tons of ways, but I'll just give you one example. For certain types of services that we provide, when a lawyer or a paralegal goes to record their time in our time and billing software, each task has a particular 3-digit number associated with it. And we have also, in TextExpander, created snippets of text that correspond to that 3-digit number. So if I have prepared and filed a trademark application for a client, I don't have to type, a 2 or 3 sentence time entry into our time and billing software. I just type a short 3-digit code and it triggers that to populate into our time and billing software, so that 2 things. Number 1, saves time, makes us more efficient.
Oh yeah.
Number 2, every client for whom we file a trademark application sees the same exact description of services on their invoice. And I can say from experience, some lawyers are very skilled at recording their time entries in a way that clients can understand and appreciate the value of what they paid for, and some are not. And so, there's no more having to, nitpick and wordsmith invoices at the end of the month to make sure that the invoice that goes out to the client says what it should say. It's just automatically in there. So, I think, that's one example. I'd say another, just kind of keeping it TextExpander is very user-friendly, very basic. Anybody can use it. Same thing for, I would say, like the G Suite of Google tools, that you can access through your browser for word processing, spreadsheets, forms, all kinds of different things. We actually built internally our intake process, just using those types of tools, and to just expand on what that means. When we engage a new client, we send them a link to a short questionnaire. It takes about 90 seconds to fill it out. They fill that out, they hit submit, and when they submit that form back to us, this is a Google form, they submit that Google form back to us, it triggers a whole bunch of different things. For example, it creates a unique it creates a unique folder for them in our filing system. It creates it populates all their information in our time and billing system so that we don't have to do that manually. It just goes in there automatically. Yeah. It generates a draft of their engagement letter automatically. So these are all things where, I've been practicing 20 years. So at the beginning of my career, this was very much a manual process. All the way up to now where, we don't need to have an intake specialist or an intake team to make sure all these things get done correctly. And it also takes out the human factor. So it's really, there's fewer errors in that process. There's really no errors. The only way there could be an error is if the client themselves actually made a typo or something like that. So that's another example. And then the one other thing I think I would mention, other than TextExpander and then kind of the G Suite of products, is Zapier. I think by now, a lot of people that are really tech savvy at all are probably familiar with this platform. I think when we started using it, it was relatively new. And as it has grown, we have grown, and it's been something that we really rely on. But just at its simplest, Zapier is a platform that allows various web-based services to talk to each other.
Yep.
And so when I talk about that, submitting that Google form, and it triggers all these different things that start happening automatically, part of that workflow involves Zapier that lets Google talk to Dropbox, talk to Clio, or time and billing software, and all these other things. So that's a few examples, and there's countless others I'm leaving out. But look, if you're a lawyer, business owner, you want to start trying to figure out how can I improve my business by using automation, I think Zapier is a really smart place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You led with TextExpander. I swear they're not even sponsoring the show, but I think this is like the third episode where they've been mentioned because it's just such a great tool. I mean, I think back to when I was an account manager, I was, handling the account over 100, accounts that we had here. And TextExpander was my best friend, especially when I had to send the monthly content emails every month. 100 clients, that would have taken me hours to write all of that out, whereas it took just 20 minutes to just TextExpander, so much easier. But yeah, I mean, G Suite, Zapier, we use those as well. So Zapier, it allows your wildest dreams to come true. If you're CRM, if Clio or Practice Panther or MyCase, whatever you're using, if it doesn't have that native integration, Zapier can turn it into an integration, and it just makes everything so much easier. And we've talked about it before, where there's a little bit of a time commitment up front to set it up, but man, the time it saves you and the time it creates in the future just makes it so much more worth it.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of a day where I've spent, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 hours just figuring out and troubleshooting and building out some automated workflow, and asking myself, did I just waste a day? And it's funny to be sitting here now and looking back at it, because I mean, I'll give one more example.
Yeah.
I've got a little automation that I created relative to my email. Whenever I receive a receipt in my email, and the way that most of us engage in commerce these days, you're often emailed receipts. I've got a little folder that I drag it into, and just by dragging it into that folder, it separates out the invoice from the email and it uploads it into our accounting platform, so that our bookkeepers and accountants can tie that receipt to a particular expenditure. And that's something I probably built that 4 years ago, and I just don't even think about it. It just happens. I just do it. And so I encourage people, check it out. It's a lifesaver.
Awesome. Well, Chris, this has been wonderful as always. I know you and I have worked together for a few years now. It's always a pleasure. Wrap it up here with our famous question. If you had one piece of advice to give all the attorneys out there, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to give two, because I had one that I thought of in advance, and then I had one that I thought of just now.
Awesome.
I would say the first one that should dovetail nicely with what we've talked about today. I hope that I'm not giving the impression that by being in a small law firm or a solo practice that relies on automation for a lot of the operations of their business, that means you necessarily are charging below market rates for your services. I'm not suggesting that at all. In fact, I think our firm, we know pretty well, I think, what market rates are, and I would say we're probably at or below them, but we're not cheap. We're by far not the cheapest firm that you could come and hire to do what we do, but we try to be the best. We try to give a really good client experience. So my advice to lawyers would be, please don't think that you have to compete on price and that automation is a way to do that. Charge what you're worth, whatever your services are worth. You're providing value, and you should charge people that value, regardless of whether you've got a ton of overhead like big firms do, or whether you can run lean like you should be. So that was number one. But the one that I thought of ahead of time that I wanted to say, I think is the same thing that you guys have done at Spotlight Branding, which is surround yourself with a good team. Yeah. That would be really the one key piece of advice that I would give, whether you're a first-year lawyer or whether you've been like me practicing for 20 years. Get a good team around you, get the right people around you, and it just makes everything else so much easier. Yeah. And whether that's in your office or, you're hiring the right vendors who are going to help work with you. Yeah, I definitely agree, which of course I'm biased. We're part of that team. So that's right. That's right.
Awesome. So yeah, that's fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for joining us this week. Everyone out there, continue to rate, review us, like, subscribe, wherever you're listening to the show. You know how it goes. That is going to wrap it up here this week. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/centerstage.